Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Semi Pro. My name is Dalton Barrett, and in the studio with me, I've got my good friend.
Hi, I'm Josh Clements. I'm good at it. Hey, Don, what did we watch this week?
I don't want to talk about it, but we're going to, because we watched Doom from 2005, and I hated every second of it, but you're listening to Semi Pro. That's right, Doom 2005 is our poison of choice for this week.
Right. Well, you've just started getting into Doom 2016.
Yes, I have been playing Doom 2016. I've been having such a good time. I played. I really technically started with Doom 2, and I played through Doom 2, and then I played a good chunk of Doom 3, and then I started 2016, and I got on this Doom binge, and Josh, you were like, hey, we should watch the movie for the podcast. And here we are.
And you loved every second of it.
I have never in my life loved a movie as much as I loved this one.
No, even I know that's fake.
I mean, jeez. Everything people say, you know how sometimes we watch a movie and whether it's a movie that we like or a movie that we don't, we're like, yeah, the things people say about this movie are wrong. That is, this is, I can confidently say that is not the case with this movie. People are mostly right about this one. Like I can say that pretty, like even with Godzilla 98, like yes, the people were right on a vast majority of issues, but like there were some things where I was like, no, this was pretty good, and like the design, for instance, people were wrong about the design, and I think it's pretty good, and the people were right with this one. Like this is a mess.
Okay, it's not that bad.
Don't do this, Josh. Don't do this.
it's not. It's not that bad. I mean, okay. I feel like you can't talk about this movie without at least talking about the legacy of the games
Oh yeah, no,
somewhat.
we're definitely going to talk about that. First thoughts on this movie. I kind of want to say, um, this movie is not like it's not a great movie, but you
It's
could make the argument like, oh well, maybe it's not a great movie, but it's a great Doom movie. Like it's a great adaptation of the game, but it's not that either. And so that's kind of where I stand on this movie. Like it doesn't do either of the things it sets out to do well. Like it's not a
well,
good
yeah.
adaptation and it's not a good movie on its own. And so it kind of falls into
So
this.
what is it?
I don't know, Josh. That's what we're here trying to figure out. We're here on our archaeological dig trying to figure out what Doom
On
2005 is.
Mars?
Yes, on Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
why
yeah.
don't you
So
break down the history of the
game,
games?
the games have a pretty good legacy, all things considered. I mean, Doom was one of the first, if not the first. I always get mixed up with Wolfenstein 3D because they're the exact same game. But Doom was basically one of the first FPS shooters. It was the first of its kind. It spawned literally a whole genre of gaming. Then they did Doom 2, which was just Doom 1 but more, and everyone was like, "Hey, I like this. This is good."
So from
And
my
then
experience playing both, Doom 2 is there's a whole lot more platforming, kinda.
yeah, Doom 2 tried to push it a little bit. Like it tried to do a little bit more because that was the days where you did try to do more with sequels. And like they came out. The original Doom release date was something like 1993.
It was
I want to
3
say.
and Doom 2 was 4.
Yeah, like they were made sort of back to back. I mean, once you had that Doom structure, you basically just went, okay, we can just pile onto this. We can add more to it. And they're pretty revolutionary as far as games go. Like they built a whole background to it. And then they released Doom 3 in 2004. And someone went, hey, I like Doom, but what if it was all in pitch black?
What if you I like Doom a lot, but what if you couldn't see anything? And
Okay,
I will say I played Doom 3 or a chunk of it somewhat
you
recently.
tried to play
I
Doom
tried to play
3.
Doom 3, but I couldn't see anything. It's I respect Doom
It's not as
3 for
bad
at
as people
least
make out to be.
yeah, for at least trying to do some stuff. I respect Doom 3. Um
Yeah, well, it was very different to what had been laid out for it. Yeah, Doom 64 too, but no one ever talks about Doom 64 because it was just so inconsequential to everything.
I also played that one
Um,
and
yes, and
it's
that one's not any good either.
no, it's not.
Um, but yeah, like Doom 3 at least tried something new. It was like, hey, this is an action series. What if we went for a more horror thing? Because we're dealing with demons and hell and all of these terrifying monsters. Um, and that's the one that you kind of got to focus on for the movie because the movie came out a year after that game released. So I have to imagine that they were kind of brought into development at the same time. Like
Well,
they
and
they said, hey, we're making Doom 3. Oh, let's make a movie to do with it.
or vice versa. I noticed a lot of the graphics on the computers and stuff in this movie looked like the graphics from Doom 3. A lot of the layouts of the scientific hallways and all that kind of stuff looked like the ones from Doom 3. There were a lot of similarities like that. So I would say you're probably right in that assumption. Um, i Everything looks. This movie looks like if I could see Doom 3, it would look like this movie.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Doom 3 is also just like Doom 3 is the red-headed stepchild of the Doom series. No one really talks about it. Even though it's the only one that I think got a re-release, um, which is strange.
Well, I know
Uh,
the first two got a re-release when Doom 2016 came out. They got a kind of
yeah,
a remaster.
they got like they're just like, hey, throw them onto the new console generations because the game's literally 32 megabytes.
Yeah, and they had
Um,
to. I know they redid all the controls and they remastered the game and so they did a lot of work. They made it widescreen instead of 4:3. A lot of little stuff like that I'm sure
Right,
goes
right. Doom
unappreciated.
2016 is yeah, well yeah, like I say, it's a lot of smaller stuff that kind of just meant, hey, you can play it and it doesn't look just awful.
Yeah, and it doesn't
But
control awful and it doesn't run awful. Like you can actually play this game now.
yeah, and then Doom, like I say, you've been playing Doom 2016, and that like that is Doom 1, but HD.
Yeah,
Like it
no,
is,
Doom 2016 is a masterpiece, and I will say that fully confidently.
yeah, it's one of my top 5 games.
And yeah, I was gonna say it's as far as video games that I've played, it is close to perfect. Like if I had to pick a perfect game, just from my limited experience of video games, it would be 2016. Now, what you'll notice here that we're doing, me and Josh,
Is not talking about Doom the movie.
we're talking about everything but Doom 2005. So here's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna shift focus and talk about the plot. Um,
Do we
the
have to?
we do because I have a question that I want to pose that happens in the first 30 seconds of this movie. Has any good movie ever started with opening narration?
Other than
Other
there's
than
got, I mean, well, you said opening narration, and I thought, for some reason, my mind went to opening crawl
no,
text.
no,
I was like,
no,
Star
no, no,
Wars.
no, not opening crawl. I mean opening narration. Has any good movie ever started with somebody narrating the opening?
I mean, I'm sure there's one out there. There's one out there somewhere. How I Met Your Mother.
But that's not a movie. That's a television series.
I
Came out
mean,
the started the same year as this movie came out.
wow, that's you never would have guessed
Nope, not once.
because it's odd how a TV series looks so much better.
And this this
Goodfellas.
and the
There you
movie.
go.
Okay, I'll give you Goodfellas. So this and the opening scene, which we get this little horror snippet scene, which is neat because this movie does kind of frame itself as a horror movie, though it doesn't feel at all like a horror movie, and the music doesn't feel like
It
a
frames
horror
itself like
movie.
it's a very very bad horror
Right,
movie.
exactly. And the opening little bit of this before the title card comes in feels so 2005. Like it oozes just this 2005 feel, because this like rock music is playing in the background while a man is being decapitated and a woman loses her arm, and this man is like eaten by a demon. This doctor, Dr. Carmack is his name. And
Yes.
it just feels like the most 2005 thing you have ever seen in your life. And then you watch the rest of the movie, and that feeling never leaves. Like it's there somewhat consistently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of, I don't know why, but my first thought was like a Final Destination movie, where like they just have every movie ends with this montage of people getting absolutely demolished over hard rock music,
Well, yeah, and this scene
while
does feel very like montage esque. It's just like this hard metal, and this guy is just being killed by a demon. But we never get to see the demon because they're saving that reveal. Oh boy,
right,
I can't wait till we see it.
yeah. Well, so the movie takes place, and it's like, hey, we found a portal to Mars.
Yeah, no,
What do
that's
you
the
know?
opening narration. The lady's just like, This ancient civilization built a portal to Mars. No one's sure why or where the
Yeah,
civilization went."
they make it sound like lost car keys. Like, oh, it's just in our back pocket the whole time.
Well, and I this is a little later in my notes once we get to the reveal, which, like the horrible reveal, and we're going to wait on that. But
Uh,
there's no reason for this movie to take place on Mars, like at all.
yeah,
Absolutely
well, the
none
game,
outside of the fact that the games take place on Mars. There's no reason
yeah,
for this movie to
the
do that.
games, the games have a reason to do that, where it's like, they take place on Mars because humanity got there, and they're just like, hey, we should conduct these experiments to do with hell, but we shouldn't do it on our own planet because we don't want to mess that up yet. And so they're just like, oh, do it in Mars. It's either that, or I think in some versions there's already like ancient civilizations who built stuff on Mars,
Yeah,
and
see
they just
that's
found it there. Which
that
even that makes more sense.
that's what I think the original plot is. The original games, I'm pretty sure they go to Mars and they find out that that had already happened. But in this movie, they they find a portal to Mars, and then once again, I'm not going to spoil the reveal. Carl Urban is very ugly in this movie. um, and he doesn't look like he looks both just like Carl Urban and like Carl Urban's like little brother who hasn't quite grown into his skin yet.
His name's also Grim Reaper.
Yes,
No,
Jack.
Reaper Grim.
Yeah, Reaper Grimm, also known as Jack, and he's just
Even though
very
his name's
ugly.
John.
We're kind of introduced to all these people,
Yeah,
and
there's The Rock, and then there's henchman number 1 through to 8.
right, there's The Rock as played by somebody doing their best impression of The Rock, and then you have just all of these various military men, and you see them and they go off and they give like their this is my thing, I'm a drug addict, this is my thing, I'm a child, this is my thing, I like Jesus, and they go down this list, and it's just all of these people, and they're just stereotypes of people like that, and then you see them and you're like, yeah, these people are all dying, every
Yeah.
last one of them
The,
is
the
dead.
only person that I can remember in my mind is that one really creepy guy who's in everything. No one
Yes.
knows his name, and he's the best reference I have is he's the guy in Kingsman who, when they're laying on the rail tracks, he's the one who's quote unquote interrogating them.
Right.
Um,
He's the creepy
I
guy
think
you've
he,
seen in everything with the blonde hair.
yeah, I think he might be the Night King in Game of Thrones. I wanna say that, even then he's covered in 400 pounds of makeup.
Yeah.
So
Who knows?
you never know. But
But
yeah, that's him, Carl Urban, and The Rock are the only ones I remember,
uh, I
and even he
also
doesn't matter.
I also remember the kid. And then there's a black guy. There's two black soldiers who literally aren't given anything. Like they're not given any personality
Oh God,
trope
no, no.
other than the fact that they're black. And then you have creepy dude is the drug addict, and then you've got the kid and ugly Carl Urban.
That
And,
that must be really demoralizing. Like, imagine going in for a reading for your role, and then halfway through they say, "Hey, you look like a drug addict."
yeah, you're the creepy drug addict in this movie. your teeth really give it away. And so those are our soldiers, and the military
Yeah,
seems super lax on rules here. They're planning their vacation, and I want to say it's drug addict, and we're just gonna call him by these names. Creepy drug addict is throwing an orange at the wall, and it's bouncing back to him for some reason. And hold on,
in the future, there's a rubber oranges.
well, so he throws it, and it smashes a lamp, and one of the soldiers, a smart soldier, I think it may be maybe Christian soldier, catches the orange while he's reading a book and then takes a bite out of it with like skin and all. And it's the weirdest scene. And then the Rock comes in and he says, "Hey soldiers," or I'm sorry, the Rock, doing his best impersonation of the Rock, comes in and says, "All right, soldiers, we're not going on vacation. We've got a level 4 quarantine on Mars." And so then they just go to Mars. They go down to what is called the Ark, which is
Arc,
the
yeah, which is a giant glob of jelly.
right. It's a giant glob of jelly that looks in no way whatsoever like it was built by an ancient civilization. And then they travel through this arc, and now suddenly they're on Mars, and it looks exactly the same because they're never
Yeah.
on like the surface of Mars doing
No, it's
anything
always in
cool.
like facilities.
You never even
Um,
get to see the
there's
surface
no
of
like,
Mars.
yeah, that's it. There's no it'd be fine if they were in facilities the whole time, but this is the opportunity where like you have a giant hallway, and on one side there's just loads of panes of glass that look over the Martian landscape, and
Or
at some point you shoot them out, and a bunch of demons get sucked out the window.
like an establishing shot, maybe, like maybe an establishing shot of this place on
It's
Mars,
so
but
it's so underwhelming.
like we don't see it looks the same. This is what I was going back to. There's no reason outside of the fact that the games take place on Mars for this to take place on Mars, to the extent where it feels like something that was added in after the fact. Like it feels like a late addition to the script where they were like, "Oh yeah, we should probably put this thing on Mars since the games are there. Why not?" Like nothing in this movie is consequential to them being on Mars at all. And the
No,
Ark, once again, doesn't feel at all ancient, like it was built
it,
by an ancient
it doesn't
civilization.
even it doesn't even feel that powerful. Like I say, they go through it and they just go whoop, whoop, and then it's just it's just a shot of a room, and they come out of it, and there's a disabled guy in a wheelchair,
His name is
and
Pinky.
Pinky, which is, I mean, I'm gonna save that.
Thank
Um,
you, thank you. We're saving the reveal.
and there's Grimm's sister Samantha,
Who
who's
creepy
the head
guy,
researcher, I think.
creepy drug addict, hits on in the creepiest way ever
Oh yeah.
by
Do you
saying
think?
he's gonna strip search her, which is just like such a 2005 line.
Yeah. Do you think they told him to say that, or that was just him?
I have
That
to
was
think
completely unscripted.
I have to think, seeing what this guy looks like, he just went for it. Like I can't imagine that was in the script. Um,
Oh
and so they, at this point, they Scooby Doo style break off into teams to
yeah.
investigate because they don't think
They
anything
just
serious is going on. They're trying to get in and get out so that they can go on their vacation.
they just
Um,
know that I think there's like 80 researchers, and they just went dark. That's all they know.
yeah,
And they got a distress call from McCormack.
from
McCormack
from Mars.
from from Mars.
It's
and Pinky and I can't remember her name. Rosamund Pike are like, yeah, they all died.
yeah,
I think they're all dead.
and it's super casual. And Pinky is probably my favorite character in this movie because he's the only one that seems to make sense. He's the
Well,
only one who
he's like
takes the threat
he's
seriously
pa- he's
whatsoever.
he's like panicking. He's like, "There's demons on Mars," and they're just like, "Nah, you're good."
Yeah, I
Just
think
it's
Creepy Dude even says at one point, like, "Yeah, I bet this was just some like crazy scientist with a gun," and it's like, clearly
there's like
not. You found a severed
there's
hand already. Like,
yeah, I
it's
was gonna say
not.
like there's blood all over these walls. Like
And so after they split up, they find these different rooms, and it's mostly set up at this point. One group, I want to say it's the black guys, the black soldiers. They find Dr. Carmack's body, and they take him back to the research lab. We're a we see a skeleton. Carl Urban and Carl Urban's sister are in her research lab because she has to get some documents, and that's part of the mission. So they're there getting the documents, and there's a skeleton shielding a baby. And Karl Urban says, "Hey, yo, what's this skeleton, my girl?" And then she says, "What's the first thing that Dad always told us to look for?" And then he looks at the DNA and finds out that the skeleton has 24 chromosomes, which is weird. On Earth, that does different things to us than it does on Mars.
Right, on Earth, that I believe that gives you Down syndrome.
Yes, which is why it's such a weird thing for them to include as a plot point of this movie, but they did, and that's fine.
Well, okay. To be fair, it's because it's a Martian chromosome. But it's not, an Earth chromosome gives you Down syndrome. A Martian chromosome gives you superpowers.
Maybe it's the fact that they had 2 extra instead of 1 extra.
Isn't it just one extra though?
No,
It's
no, no.
24th, and there's only 23.
Maybe you're
I,
probably right.
but yeah, they find it, and
I'm
their
not a
dad
scientist.
their mom and dad died when they were super young. I can't remember why. I think it plays into the plot, but I can't remember.
I don't think it
um,
does.
but like, yeah, apparently their dad just told them to look for this super specific thing, and at the same time, a bunch of the other Marines who found the injured doctor, but they're like trying to help him, and he just disappears. Um, and then they get attacked by a creature, and
In the
like
sewers,
it
kid
kills.
gets high.
Yeah,
This is important, or at least they set it up to be important. Um, the kid, the young guy, takes some of drug addicts' drugs, and Karl Urban gets mad at him later in the movie, and that's literally all that plays into. But yeah, so Dr. Carmack, they find him. They all meet in the med bay. They're studying him or whatever. The Rock goes because there's another little distress call, so he takes several of the soldiers. Dr. Carmack escapes and leaves because turns out he's not actually dead. He pulls off his own ear at one point, which is weird. And then this movie's so confusing. And then he leaves. We miss the part where we get the big reveal of the weapon room, because that happens during this kind of establishing.
oh, right,
And we
right.
get the big
Where they have the
reveal.
BFG.
We get the big reveal of the BFG, which stands for Bioforce Gun. Which it's like,
Um,
why do that?
well, so the BFG in the games is the best weapon. It it's one of the best weapons that you could ever get. Um,
Oh, it's the best
it,
weapon
it
in Doom. There's no better weapon in
yeah,
Doom. Like,
right, it kills things instantly.
yes, and it kills a lot of them instantly. And in this
Instantly.
movie, even outside of the name change, right? Because I could forgive it. It's a movie, you got
Right.
to do things a bit
Well,
more realistic, whatever. But the gun's
yeah,
just
the name.
lame.
Well, the gun. Everything in the movie shoots jelly, and I don't know what it is with the future and gelatin, but like the arc is a portal that's made of jelly. The BFG shoots like a ball, and it detonates, and it kind of takes out a bare corner of the room, and that's it. And it like the BFG in the games would destroy everything in sight essentially, and then it would just leave nothing standing. And in this one, it kind of basically is worse than an actual grenade.
And another thing about the BFG in this movie, we never see it used on any living thing.
No, they use it. The Rock picks it up and he like shoots it at one and misses, and it's just like a giant piece of acid that slowly melts something.
Yeah,
And then, other than that, I can't think of it being used properly.
it's never used on a human being or a demon.
No.
Not once. Not a single time. Um I have in my notes here the first gun in your Doom film is fired. Any guesses?
Uh, I'm gonna go with at Shadows.
No, no, no. Time mark.
Oh, the movie itself. How long was the movie? Like, I want to say 90 minutes because I feel like it's something that'd be so bare bones.
It was a
Um,
very quick movie.
I'm gonna go with 50 minutes in.
31 minutes. The 31-minute mark, the first gun is fired
Okay,
in your Doom movie. Which
right,
isn't
which
horrible, but isn't great.
right. Well, I mean, that goes into something I want to talk about later. But that's not terrible. My issue is more just sort of the guns don't feel like they do anything.
No, they don't. They don't
Um,
do a thing. Um,
no, they say that like, okay, basically demons have escaped onto Mars because they're trying to do whatever. I don't care. But they escape onto Mars and they're like, I think they call them cybernetic organisms because they're like half demon, half mutant,
well,
half
so at this point, we,
robot.
we we see Dr. Carmack come back, and they fight another demon in the sewers, and they kill him, and they bring him back, and they start dissecting him. Over the course of this time, another one of the soldiers has been attacked by this demon, and he is locked in the containment room. He's dead. Like they've checked his pulse, everything. He is dead. He's done. But he stands up and starts banging his head on the window and commits suicide. So they start dissecting this other demon that they found, and Karl Urban's sister comes to the conclusion that it's human because it's had its appendix removed, which she turns out to be right. And these aren't demons at
She's right,
all.
but for the wrong reason.
These aren't demons at all. They're human beings, which is so dumb, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But how couldn't it just like have not had an appendix to begin with?
I, well, that's the thing. She's right, but not because of the right reasons. Like, look, surely there's better ways to test if one of these things is human, other than its appendix. You know, like, oh, it's got red blood.
Or,
What
oh,
do you know?
this one is trapped in the door and its DNA is Dr. Carmack's DNA. Maybe that's a better way to test it.
Maybe just like looking at them and you're like, oh, they've got a very humanoid shape. They're probably some kind of human.
So it turns out we find out through some elaborate plotting that on Mars they were testing to give human beings the extra 24th chromosome, and in doing so, they turned the evil human beings, the people with a quote unquote, this is an actual quote from the movie, the people with a bad soul into demons, and the people with a good soul get to be superheroes, which is like the weirdest, the weirdest scientific explanation I've ever heard in my life. Like what a
I mean,
trade-off. Like you can either be a superhero who's
well,
real cool, or you get to be a demon.
well, there's also no way to know that beforehand. Like, they don't.
Yes.
There's no way to test if someone's a good person. There's no like, oh, we'll test your blood and see if you got the bad soul. um, they're just like, oh, try it and then see what happens.
Oh, poor guy. He got born with a bad soul. Whew. Man, can't
Well,
find good help
I
these
mean,
days. Like,
Captain America did the same thing, where it's like, oh, if you get this and you're a bad person, you become even more worse. But they didn't transform you into mutants.
right,
It
right.
happened to Red Skull because he was using an early form of it. You can't pick and choose based on someone's soul.
It's so stupid. It's so dumb. But then sometimes it's just both, right? Like Pinky.
Right? There's no Pinky, for all intents and purposes, does not seem to have that bad a soul. Like he's not.
No,
He's
and
not
he's a
good.
normal person after he's been infected, and he's a normal person for a good bit of time, and he's fine, and then suddenly he's not.
I also don't like. It's so random what kind of mutation you get. Like some of these guys
No,
look
it's
like
not.
zombies,
They all look the same except for one of them.
except for two of them.
Who's the other one?
Actually, no. I'm thinking of one of the actual demons.
Well,
I
the,
think.
the 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 Rock and Pinky look different, and then everyone else looks identical.
Well, there is a Baron of Hell. I think.
I
God,
don't
I'm trying
remember a
to. I saw
Baron.
this movie. I saw this movie 2 days ago, and I can't remember anything from it.
No, that should be
That should
noted.
tell you everything you
We'll,
need to
we'll,
know.
we'll note that right this second. This is such a forgettable movie. Nothing of note happens at all. Everything is just unconsequential to the next thing. And they basically they make like a 30-minute chunk of the movie, which is they get there, they question some things, they look around for a bit, they fight a demon, and then they just repeat that like two more times. And that's the plot of this movie. That's really it. I don't remember a Baron, but I could be wrong.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Bound of Hell. It was a Hell Knight. They're like the bald ones that have that weird texture on their skin.
You
And they're
just
also
described
bigger.
all of them.
The demon.
I do
Well,
remember
there's
some of
that,
them
and then
being
also
bigger and some of them being smaller. I do remember that.
right, right. But there's also like some of them look like just normal humans in clothes that uh uh. y- Did God, I can't remember.
So
Pinky looks different.
I think in this movie the idea there is they're different stages of the mutation. So the longer you
Right.
stay
Okay.
walking around without being shot by Karl Urban, the longer you get to look like the more you get to mutate and go. Except for Pinky, who just looks completely different. He
Well,
just
Pinky looks different because in the games there's a monster called Pinky, which
right.
admittedly he looks close to the monster from the games, in that he's a pink thing with two legs and a tail and teeth. But like, there's
And a wheel
no.
butt.
Is it? Is it? Yeah, I was gonna say, is it because he's disabled? Because that wheelchair isn't part of him. It doesn't like merge with him when he mutates. I don't. I don't understand this movie. But yeah, essentially, like I say, this is you know, you were kind of, you're right. This is like Mortal Kombat. It's a movie that doesn't really have a plot. It repeats the same scenes 5 times, and in the end, is really underwhelming.
Yeah, well, and a huge thing for me is normally I'm like, well, you don't have to obey the source material to make a movie good. In fact, a lot of times not obeying the source material can help you to tell your own story and to tell it better. But in this movie, what made someone think, we're making a Doom movie, let's make all the Doom demons people? What? Like, imagine if the games did that. Like, you're just walking around killing innocent people the whole time. Like, I can't wrap my brain around.
I don't. No, I don't understand this movie. I just don't understand. I don't understand any of the creative choices behind this movie. I don't understand any of the technical choices behind this movie. Uh, and
This
I'm a pretty. I like Doom a lot. And even this is just it's absolute crap. Just there's nothing to it. The film basically ends. There's one reason that anyone ever talks about this movie, and it's the first person scene.
Yeah, but okay. I'm I think I'm ready to talk about the first person scene. We do have to talk about The Rock first because they've set The Rock up as the protagonist of this movie, and then they do this neat little. He gets progressively more unlikable as the the middle chunk of the movie rolls along, and we
Well,
start
yeah,
sort of.
it's like by the time he gets to the BFG.
Well, so he gets the BFG during the first like half hour of the movie, and then he comes back to the BFG later. And then he gets the BFG, and that's sort of when we start seeing The Rock kind of unravel. And he gets, like I said, progressively more unlikable as he goes, and he turns out to be the antagonist of the movie, which is fine. But it's
I like that you were going to try and say neat, and you couldn't even bring yourself to admit that give
any
this movie
well,
that.
it is neat, but I don't want to admit that anything in this movie is neat. It was I wasn't expecting it. I will say that it did take me off guard. It surprised me, which doesn't happen very often. Um,
Right. It is an idea. Um,
yes, it certainly happened. And turning John into the protagonist of this movie, um, I have in my notes here. Turning John into the protagonist was a nice role reversal that everyone saw coming for the last 15 minutes. And it's pretty true. And he John gets pretty heavily injured. The only two surviving or the only three surviving people on Mars presumably cuz they've already evacuated Mars are The Rock, John or the Grim Reaper, Karl or ugly Karl Urban and ugly Karl Urban's sister. And so they all three go home. And John is very injured, and so his sister says, "Here, I took some of the horrible demon serum, and I want to inject you with it." And he says, "What? Please, don't do that." And she says, "It's okay. You have a good soul. I
Good soul.
know." It's like, how you're a scientist. How could you possibly know that? Um, but they
Well, like I said, there's no test for it. You don't like use the thermometer and be like, oh, your body temperature's at 94 degrees, you're good to go. Like there's no.
I appreciate you using Fahrenheit there, Josh. That was
I don't.
it's
This movie
tough. You
is
can't like look at
beyond
somebody's you
frustrating.
can't look at somebody's eyes and be like, "Oh, you got the good soul." Like there's no like you just can't do that.
That's how this movie like treats it though. They're just like you look at someone, good person right there. Like you say, Pinky, like, Pinky was experimenting on people, sure, but he was doing it for the betterment of the human race. He wasn't a bad guy. He just got caught in a bad predicament, and
Pinky
he's
was the
apparently a
secretary. He
giant
was running the
monster.
desk up front. Pinky wasn't doing anything to people. All he did was let people in. He
Right? He
opened
was.
the doors.
Yeah, did I expect him to be? Oh, I'm going to take you all down from my wheelchair.
Like I don't understand like where the line is. And like I
Like,
said, some
there's no.
it's frustrating. But anyway, turns out John does have the good soul because he wakes up and he wakes up with a camera strapped to his chest instead of waking up as a horrible demon.
And Sam's gone. Uh, Sam's disappeared for some reason, which we find
Which
out.
is weird. You would
And
think she would like hang out with him, like make sure he's all
right,
right, but she just
well,
leaves.
I can only imagine that she injected. She was like, "You're a good soul. You've got this." She injected it as soon as he passed out. She was like, "Yeah, I'm getting out of here. I'm not risking it. I can't. He might be a bad soul. I haven't seen him in like 15
Yeah,
years."
no, I don't know who this guy is. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, I hated him. Like I straight up hated my brother. And it's like, so he wakes up and like I said, he's got a GoPro strapped to his chest because the next like 15 minutes of this movie, it goes on for so long, is from a first person perspective, which is kind of cool.
It's amazing.
Except for it's super underwhelming. Um, it's a neat
Well,
idea that's so boring and goes on for so long. But he doesn't do anything
well,
cool. Like there's a couple of scenes where you're like, oh, okay, he's gonna do this thing from the games. Like there's one of the demons has a chainsaw like at him, and then he just shoots him, and it's like, oh, okay. And then he moves on to the next demon, and he just shoots him, and it's just, and it goes on for a very long
it's that
time.
for over and over again.
And then it cuts away from the first person. You're like, okay, cool, that's done. And then it cuts back to the first person while Ugly Carl Urban fights Pinky with a chainsaw now. And he, instead of just like ripping straight through him with a chainsaw, they have him repeatedly like stab him with a chainsaw and then lose the fight and shoot Pinky. And then that's the end of the first person scene. And it's a very neat idea with some of the worst execution I've ever seen for an idea that neat.
Well, I mean, like I say, Doom pioneered first-person shooting.
Oh,
Like
absolutely. I agree.
it pioneered. So you can't. It was nice to do a nod to that and be like, hey, this is the first. Technically, it's the first. It's the first run at Hardcore Henry, but if Hardcore Henry was severely awful.
If Hardcore
Um,
Henry had less of a story than Hardcore Henry already had, and more of a gimmick somehow, doing the same thing for less time, it would be this scene in this movie.
Yeah, and like you say, it's super unreal. Like okay, I don't want to compare this movie too much to Doom 2016 because there's 10 years between those. They're completely different. I don't really think you can compare a game to a movie like properly, because they're two different mediums that are vastly different. But like Doom 2016 has glory kills where you murder demons in brutal, amazing fashion, and that's what this should have had. Like he should have walked over to one of the demons and done the King Kong thing where he like snaps the jaw open.
Yeah, do
He should
that,
have like beaten a
or
bunch of them
even
with his
like
hands.
I don't know, pick up different weapons along the way, so you get like a shotgun blow
Right,
or
or
whatever.
like, well, that's like they're like, oh, you become a super soldier, and then they don't do anything super soldierish.
No,
He just
nothing
walks
at
around with a
all.
gun, which he's been doing for the last 4 hours.
Right, and it's boring. And it's not bad. It's certainly not the worst thing in this movie because I've heard that a lot. Like a lot of people are very negative on the first person scene, and it's certainly not like the worst thing in this movie. In fact, it's probably
No,
one of the better things. It may be the best thing in this movie, which says a lot because this
which
scene
says a lot.
sucks. um, but it goes on for too long. That's my biggest issue with it. It goes on for too long, and they don't do enough with it. Especially since it seems to be just like a reference to the games. You don't need it to go on for as long as it went on. And then we get to
No,
what I would call the most boring part of the movie, which once again says a lot. And it is sort of like the last action sequence, which you want to be like the huge like culmination of your movie. The Rock has been overtaken by a demon, and it's him versus our superhuman John, and they're gonna duke it out. And so they start shooting at each other a little bit, and then they run out of ammo, even though even though the Rock is just using the BFG. They both run out of ammo, so they take off their belts and they decide, you know what, we're gonna settle this like men.
like extra chromosomes, men.
And they start fist fighting each other. And that's your last action scene in your Doom movie is two grown men, one of them being The Rock doing his best impersonation of himself and ugly Karl Urban fist fighting in a science lab. That's the finale of your Doom movie.
and and it ends in the most climatic way possible. He just kind of throws the rock through the portal.
He throws him through the portal and then throws a grenade in there, which I guess
Right.
was like setting up
Which
for a sequel, maybe. Like it was kind of like, oh, could he have survived? Like The Rock could come back in full demon form. But this movie's not getting a sequel.
no, no. Well, okay. So that this the movie basically just ends there. But I wanted this is something else I wanted to talk about. Right? Can you actually make a Doom movie? Because I don't know if you can. Because
Apparently. And
well, the
I
closest
talked
thing
to some
you
people I know about Doom Annihilation, the sequel to, or no,
right,
the
we're watching that
reboot
next
of
week, right?
this, the reboot of the Doom franchise. Apparently, it's pretty good. Like
Okay, so we're
it's
watching that next week.
maybe yeah. If you want to, we can. It's
You know, I'm down for it. I've seen images. The images actually look kind of solid. Like,
I watched the first like 30 seconds or so, and it was fine. They're not on Mars in this one. They're on the moon of Mars, which is called the Doomed Moon, which is where the Doom term comes from.
well,
And
the games take place on Phobos, so that actually matches up closer with the reboots.
well, gotcha.
So
Yeah, well, and it's a more recent movie, and like I said, the guy I talked to, he said, yeah, that one's not bad. So I think you can, and we will figure out how at some point. I think you can because the games, especially the first two, sort of three, not really. They're so light on the story that you can kind of roll with it and do whatever you want as long as you hit a few points. This movie just didn't hit the few points it
any of
needed
them.
to. There's no reason. Think about this for a second. There's no reason for this to be a Doom movie at all.
Yeah,
Name one.
yeah.
Name a reason that
It
this
has
this should
it
have
has
been
a
a Doom
first
movie.
person sequence. It's a first person sequence.
Okay. All right. No,
Uh,
I'm not giving
it
you that one.
has
I'm not
it
giving you
has
that, Josh. Any movie
it
can
has a
have that.
thing called Pinky. It has a thing called Pinky, and it looks kind of like the demon.
Kinda. Yeah. This feels like the kind of thing where it was like there was a script and they didn't know what to do with it, and then Doom 3 was in development and they were like they blew the dust off of it on the shelf and were like, "Oh, we have this movie called 24th Chromosome on Mars. Let's use this and we'll make Doom the movie and we'll cast this new up and coming actor, The Rock, and give him the least charismatic character in the world because there's no way he could be good at conveying charisma. And this ugly guy, Carl Urban, there's no way he can not look ugly. And then they made this movie, and
Well,
it's
okay. Hear me out. Hear me out. This is my pitch for the Doom reboot movie. Because so before we had Mortal Kombat, which is the simple same title as the game, first movie that's awful, kind of boring, and the same scenes for over and over again. That doesn't even really need to be connected to the games. Then you have the sequel, which is subtitled Annihilation, and is a little bit more fun, a little bit more self-aware of what it is, and just kind of goes to have fun with its movie, even though it's not better on a technical level. So, in theory, pretty soon, we should be getting the Doom. It will be just titled Doom again, all caps. I was right about this when I said that all of the horror franchises are going to do sequels to the first movie that ignore all other sequels in the coming years. And look what happened. You got Halloween, you got Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're doing it. I can predict the future of movies, but here's what you do. You do a new Doom movie, and you have Karl Urban come back, but this time he's the Doomslayer because the Doomslayer in the games is the original guy behind Doom 1, Doom 2, and Doom 3. Well, 3 is BFA. Uh, and then he got imprisoned in hell for like 4,000 years or whatever, and now he's like supercharged and hates all demons. Just bring Karl Urban back. He doesn't mind wearing the mask. Dredd showed that. You could probably get a few good action scenes out of it. I predict that movie will be coming 2024.
so
And
there
if I'm wrong, people can yell at me and tell me I'm wrong.
there was some rumor that I read from some website that I've never even heard of that they were making a direct sequel to this movie with The Rock as the main character, being Doom Guy. That was a rumor that I had heard. And I think you could do it with either one, and I really don't care which because this movie is so inconsequential to existence that you can just do whatever. Like if you wanted to tie it in, you could say that The Rock was able to fight off his demon or whatever.
The
Either
Rock
way,
is now a good guy.
doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah, whatever. I would like to see a Doom movie, and with the Fallout series that we're getting,
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah. I forget about that.
Bethesda is licensing out their properties for live action media. Let's see it. Let's see a
I
Doom. Let's see
I
a Doom
genuinely
movie.
think I think we're slowly, very slowly but surely entering a golden age of game movies. The same way that the 2010s held a golden age of comic book movies.
Yeah, I
As
mean
long as
we've
you
had
ignore
one good one
AVX.
and one that sucked in the last 2 years. Yeah, let's do it. It's the golden age, man.
It's basically the golden age. Um, but I
We've had
genuinely
one
think
good video game movie ever in history, and it's the golden age. Yeah,
yeah, you got Sonic, you got Detective Pikachu, technically. You got
I forgot Detective Pikachu even existed.
it's got a sequel, I think.
Ah,
Um, there's a movie that's out currently that I want to watch. It's got Frank Grillo in it, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically about a guy who gets stuck in a time loop, and every time he dies, he wakes up. It's Groundhog Day, but with action, and it's like the perfect video game. Oh, boss level, that's it. It's like the perfect video game movie, and I can't wait to check that out. But I think that a Doom movie nowadays would probably be pretty good. It'd be tough to make, and I think you wouldn't be able to have Doom Guy as the main character because he doesn't have a character.
I
Um,
think that's been done though. Like we've seen that done, and we've seen it done okay. You just
it
have to
worked.
put a surrounding cast with him that's good.
I mean, well, that's the thing. I think you wouldn't be able to have him be the main character. You would have to have, random, random henchman guy number 15 be the main character, and they're just, following him around, or they're doing their own thing while his carnage goes on in the background.
Well, it's the idea of the character, like the man from nowhere type character. We've seen that done, and we've seen it done well. And
Yeah,
um,
but they usually still have some kind of character. It's just their character's left ambiguous. But
right,
like,
I think you
like,
could do something like that with Doom Guy. Two
well, Doom Guy
questions.
Doomguy doesn't talk though. That's the issue. Like, you can't have a character. It's their movie that has a like the silent protagonist is done, but there's usually people out there to give him a backstory. And Doomguy's backstory is just, oh, he really hates demons.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good movie with that, with like a silent protagonist. Um, and I can't off the top of my head. Um, I
But
guess.
what were the two questions you had?
Well, okay. So the two questions I've got. Um, you. So who would you pick to direct, and who would you pick to as your main star? Who would you pick to play Doom Guy, and who would you pick to direct? Because there is a correct answer for a director, but I don't know that there's a correct answer for star.
I mean, okay. So the like this is I don't know if I'd agree with this, but first thing that came to my mind was Chad Stahelski
Okay.
for the Vector. I don't know who you'd have to do for the main star. I guess like so the guy currently leading the Halo series, I think it's Lee Schreiber's brother. I want to
Yeah.
say.
Okay. Yeah. Mustache cop from
Yeah,
Orange
yeah,
Is the
yeah.
New Black.
Yeah, Porn Stash from Orange is the New Black. I think he'd be pretty good because he's like 8 foot tall, and I remember him saying, or at least a lot of the action scenes in The Rock's most famous movie, Skyscraper, was actually done by him. It was the Shaq thing from Steel where you don't have any stuntmen who's 8 foot tall, so you just kind of have to learn to do it yourself.
Right.
I like those would be my go-to. I there's probably someone better. I just can't think of him right now.
Well,
Who are
I've
you
got
gonna
an
say?
easy pick for director, but I'm not sure about actor. I would go with Sam Raimi. Because we
Okay.
because for number one, because I always pick Sam Raimi as the director for everything, but it's based off of his two most popular franchises, the Spider-Man trilogy and the Evil Dead trilogy. Because the Evil Dead trilogy shows us that he knows how to do horror comedy, and he knows how to do horror comedy really well. And I think the best way to play a Doom movie is to do horror comedy. I think that's the best way you can get the point across. Because like if you're going straight horror, it's going to make it kind of tough because you have this um because it is just such like it's just action, right? It's just you go all out and you're just going action and you're killing demons over and over and over again, and eventually that's going to get funny. So if you just go with that from the get-go, then I think you know what you're doing. And on
Well,
okay, go ahead.
I well, I was gonna say I actually saying that I wouldn't mind it because there is some kind of humor to the games.
Yeah, no, that is part of there too. Especially like especially the first two. There's sort of like a wink wink kind of thing with the first two games that three and the sequels have a bit of it, but not as much as the first two. Or the reboot games have a bit of it. I haven't played Eternal yet, but 2016 has a little bit. Um,
Eternal has a little bit more. I
mhm.
think there's a great sequence where he walks in through a place that has a bunch of humans in it because he's trying to shoot a cannon essentially, and he just walks in, all of them back away from him because they're terrified, and he grabs a key card that's around someone's neck and drags the guy in a wheelchair over to a terminal where he just swipes it, then steals a gun off of a guard who's too scared to say no to him and just walks off.
See, that's a great thing. Like that's a Sam Raimi scene, and so for that reason, and also we know he's good at adaptation. Not only from the Spider-Man trilogy, but even from a movie like Oz the Great and Powerful, which I think is a pretty solid movie. From a story standpoint and visually, it's the most unnecessary film I've ever seen, but it's solid. And so we know he's good at adapting things. He knows what to keep, he knows what to change to make the story flow from a movie standpoint. So for that reason, Sam Raimi is my pick as director of the Doom remake. And we would also get to see Bruce Campbell cameo as like a horrible demon, which would be great too. Um,
Well, it'd be great to have him be a Doom guy,
he's a little old for Doom Guy,
Doomslayer.
but that would be awesome.
Well,
Um,
here's what you do is because Doom Guy never removes his helmet, you have his helmet get hit by something and it shatters, but it's just the chin.
yes, it's illuminated CGI Bruce Campbell chin. Perfect. We've got it. We figured it out.
I I wouldn't mind it.
I think
My
Sam
only
Raimi
worry
would
would
be
be the
really
action.
good at that kind of movie. Um, because if you or a Sam Raimi type, doesn't have to be Sam Raimi, but a Sam Raimi type who can do horror comedy well, who can kind of play into those aspects, who can make it a little more stylized. Because there are some things you have to do in a movie like this where you have to stylize things a bit. You can't do it straight like you can most horror movies.
Right. Well, that like I say, yeah, you can't. Doom's not a game that has the ability to do a one-to-one adaptation.
No, not at
Um,
all. You
like
you have to change some things. You have to adapt some things, which is fine. It's a movie. It's
right.
it's not the games. If you want the games, play the games. Don't watch the movie. Um, which I can't believe I'm
Do you
saying
know
that after watching the movie we just watched because it sucked. It was so bad.
that there's a lot of times where you should try and be original. You should try and keep the heart of whatever you're making, but do something new to it. And this is not one of those times. They should have just
Or
not made this
they
movie.
should have just not made it straight up. There's nothing redeemable in this movie outside of maybe the first person scene, and you can watch that in a clip on YouTube and skim through it. You don't even have to watch the whole thing. There
Oh yeah.
is it's time to close this, by the way. We spent more
Well, I was
time
gonna say,
talking
do you know
about
who'd be
the theoretical remake than we did the actual movie.
That's because even in theory, a remake is far better than this movie. But I was gonna say, do you know who'd be kind of neat to have as a Doom guy, and it's a guy who likes wearing masks and even doesn't mind not talking. Uh, uh, you need to put stilts in him, but Tom Hardy'd be pretty good.
Tom Hardy could do it, yeah. Plus, he's got that annoying voice, so you wouldn't want him to talk. Um,
Right, exactly. And you wouldn't see him, so
yeah,
you wouldn't be
with
annoyed
with
at
with
his.
with Fury Road, that's not a bad choice.
Yeah, I mean,
Fury Road is
Fury
a
Road
great
is basically
example of how you could make this movie, but good.
right. Yeah, like I say, you have someone else be the main character, and Doom guy's just kind of passing through, and he's like, hey. Oh, these people are like, oh, there's this guy who is literally killing everyone. We should probably just stick with him.
Yeah, no, that was a great. Thank you for bringing up Fury Road. It didn't even cross my mind, and it should
No,
have.
I'm probably gonna go. I'm probably gonna go watch Fury Road tonight. It's such a fantastic
Yeah,
movie.
every time Fury Road comes up, I just rewatch it because it's the closest thing in existence to a perfect film. Um,
But
s-
with that, we should probably close out
yes,
the quote unquote conversation that we had about quote unquote Doom 2005.
there
Even though I
is
spent it talking about everything but Doom 2005.
there is nothing. Like I said, there's nothing redeemable in this movie. There's nothing that makes this movie worth watching. There's certainly nothing that makes this movie worth watching again. If you want to watch it just to say that you've seen it, I can get that. I wouldn't recommend it,
I
but I can understand it.
wouldn't agree with
It's
that.
not a movie where I'm like, yeah, I was glad I watched this. Um, and I can't understand why they did anything that they did. And this movie left me baffled around every turn.
The best way that I can describe this movie is my life is pretty much the exact same after watching it as it was before watching it, because it is the most inconsequential thing in the world.
The best way I could describe this movie is my life. and, and I promise that's not something you want to to see play out in front of your eyes. Um,
Yeah,
ugh,
you should all join us next week when we watch the second sequel to a video game adaptation that is also subtitled Annihilation.
that isn't a
In
sequel; it's a reboot. But maybe it's
it,
a sequel. But maybe it's not.
yeah, they might as well be. I mean, the first Mortal Kombat and the second Mortal Kombat might as well not even be connected.
So, as far as I can tell about Doom Annihilation, it's it's not like it takes place in the future. Um, and this movie may take place in the future. I don't know, but they never imply that it does. I guess theoretically
Well,
it does because we can travel to Mars, but they don't. They don't ever say that.
I feel like I think the opening text crawl says something like, "Oh, the year is 2045 or something like that.
Josh,
2000 something.
you really don't remember
Like
this movie, do you? Because there's no
no,
opening
not at all.
text scroll.
Well, just
It
because
doesn't happen.
anything is more. That's because like I started it and this person started speaking at me and I just tuned out because I couldn't.
There's there. Okay, we gotta go. Thank you
Right,
for listening to this episode of Semi Pro. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a like, maybe subscribe to the channel if you want. If you're listening on any of our podcast platforms, go ahead and follow the podcast, like this, leave a review if you want to. It helps out the show. We will see you on the very next episode of Semi Pro.